We have a couple of agenda changes under public participation. We have two speakers, Reverend Derek Shelby and Dana Ostergaard. Under proclamations, we have domestic violence, and we have the mental illness proclamation as well. I'm also going to ask, because we have a slight last-minute request by our legal, we're going to pull two items, one off the finance agenda regarding the New Milford, resolution, and also under economic development, if we could pull the New Milford resolution. Those are tied together, and there's one small language change that'll come back in 2 weeks per Attorney Kurlinkus. Thank you on that. And with that, I will ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Webster. Here. Westcott.
Here.
Wilson.
Here.
Biondo.
Present.
Booker.
Present.
Boomer.
Here.
Crosby. Here. Fellers. Padusha.
Here.
Gurl.
Present.
Gorel. Present. Hoffman.
Present.
Jury.
Present.
Kelly.
Here.
McDonald.
Present.
Nicolosi.
Here.
Rett. Present. Salgado.
Present.
Schultz.
Here.
Tassoni.
Present.
19 present, 1 absent.
Thank you, Clerk Mullins. Our invocation, Mr. Boomer, and I believe you have a very special guest, if you wouldn't mind introducing him.
Yeah, my father-in-law, Major Bruce Smith, retired minister from the Salvation Army.
Do we want to bring him up front, Mr. Boomer? Right here? Okay.
Jesus, when you were here on earth, you said we should love everyone. Help us to love others, whether they're family, neighbors, friends, or others. Help us to love them for other countries, different appearances, or different religions, or have no religion. Help us to vote in integrity. Help us to help them whatever we need. We vote for, help us to not vote for our finances, but for betterment of others. May this voting time be for the betterment of Rockford City or the surrounding areas. Thank you for the members present. Bless them. May this voting time be successful time in your eyes. Amen.
Amen. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, sir. We have two proclamations this evening. Danielle Angeleri, I think I saw Danielle come in. Can you come on up, please, Danielle? We have a proclamation in recognition of mental illness awareness. Whereas mental health conditions are real and prevalent in Winnebago County, the state of Illinois, and the nation, whereas 1 in 5 Americans will be affected by a mental health condition in their lifetime, and every American is affected or impacted through their friends and family. And whereas all people experience times of difficulty and stress in their lives, but with early intervention and effective treatment, those individuals with mental health conditions can recover and lead full, productive lives. And whereas each business, school, government agency, healthcare provider, organization, and citizen share the burden of mental health problems and have a responsibility to promote mental health, wellness, and support prevention efforts. Whereas Winnebago County has established the Mental Health Advisory Committee to assess the system of services addressing mental health conditions and prioritize interventions. And whereas the National Alliance on Mental Illness serves Winnebago County and Northern Illinois to support, provide education and resources to, and advocate for those who need mental health assistance. Now therefore be it resolved, I, Frank Haney, Chairman of the Winnebago County Board, do hereby recognize the contributions of the National Alliance of Mental Illness to promote mental illness awareness. Danielle, thank you so much for being here and for all of your hard work. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. Our next proclamation, if I could have, I think Mr. Gasparini join us on behalf of the Sheriff's Department to have a proclamation of domestic violence awareness. This is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Thank you, sir. Good to see you. Whereas domestic violence crosses all socioeconomic lines, including but not limited to race, ethnicity, gender, age, education, employment, and marital status. And whereas in the state of Illinois, a domestic violence-related crime is reported every 4 minutes, 12 seconds, or 342 times per day. Whereas in 2016, the Winnebago Sheriff's Department responded to over 1,700 domestic-related calls in Winnebago County. Whereas in the year 2016, over 1,200 children and adult victims of domestic violence sought emergency shelter, legal advocacy, and hotline services from local domestic violence program Remedies Renewing Lives. Likewise, over 2,800 emergency order of protections were requested in Winnebago County. Whereas throughout the month of October, the Family Violence Coordinating Council and other prevention groups will be hosting several events to bring awareness to the issue of domestic violence and thus give hope to all victims of abuse struggling with this issue. And now therefore be it resolved, I, Frank Haney, Chairman of the Winnebago County Board, do proclaim October 2017 Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And to accept that is our very own Mr. Gasparini from the Sheriff's Department. Thank you for all your efforts, sir. Thank you.
You're closer, I still love you.
Where's the media?
You're right here, yeah. There we go. Yeah, but I still love Mr. Chairman.
Just don't repeat it.
And I have no budget amendments, thank you.
I think the board should give him a clap for it. Thank you, Mr. Gasparini. See, there is hugging and even kissing in county government, I guess. My goodness. Our next, yes we do. Thank you, Mrs. Grohl. Our next item of business, public participation. My friend Reverend Shelby is with us this evening. Thank you, Mr. Shelby. As he's coming up, I'm going to read our rules, limitation of debate. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes. Speakers may not address zoning matter, which are zoning matter pending before the ZBA, zoning committee, or the county board. Personnel matters or pending or threatened litigation may not be addressed in open session. An individual may speak a maximum of 3 times per calendar year on the same topic. This prohibition shall include the repetition of the same topic in a statement or what is purported to be a different topic. Personal attacks or inappropriate language of any sort will not be tolerated. Mr. Shelby, you're up. Thanks for joining us, sir.
Matthew chapter 25, verse 41. Then shall he say also unto them on the left hand, Depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. Rockville, Illinois has a race problem. Serious race.
Reverend Shelby, we've talked about multiple times, more than 3 times, which is our limit on the topic of race.
Well, I think that I should be able to speak about race. Since they're talking about it all over the nation, and Rockville has a serious history of racial violence.
Reverend Shelby, I'm going to stop, and that is the end of your presentation, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Our next Speaker for public participation, Dana Ostergaard. Dana, thank you for joining us.
Good evening. Today I want to voice my concern regarding the allocation of the fiscal year 18 operating budget cut expenditures. In an interest of honesty and transparency, I need to say I am the proud wife of a Winnebago County Sheriff's Deputy. And so I speak today not for fear of my own personal financial situation, but out of the firsthand impact and pride that I know the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department takes in their job and their service to their community. That said, on September 28th, when the current operating budget cuts were enacted, a singular message was sent to the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department, and that is that their service, their dedication to their community, and the work that they do on a daily basis has no value. So I want to challenge that thought today, and I want to prove the value of the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department. In 2010, a study was published called The Cost of Crime to Society, and it provided crime-specific estimates to the economic loss associated with crime, including criminal justice system costs, victim costs, the opportunity cost of not pursuing a less criminal activity endeavor, and the intangible costs, including the decreased quality of life. So far, in 2017, the Sheriff's Department has reported a decrease in major crime of 6%. Using the cost per crime values noted in that study and adjusting for inflation, the 6% reduction avoided this year alone, or projected through the end of this year, has saved the criminal justice system $1.6 million and the victim costs of $2.4 million for a combined savings of $4 million. This does not take into account the additional revenue generated by 24% increase in DUI arrests, 11% increase in warrant arrests, and 59% increase in citations issued. This year is projected to end with nearly 216 more warrant arrests at the end of this calendar year. If each warrant had just a $100,000 bond, it's pretty simple to see and apply simple math that that's a big cut in revenue. And by the way, those budget cuts have closed your warrant division. I argue that the Sheriff's Department, based on just these numbers alone, has tremendous value, and the work that they've done has had a positive impact on the financial situation of Winnebago County. I further ask you to consider Maslow's basic hierarchy of needs. We learned that in Psychology 101 in college, and that the security and their personal security is foundational when exploring any motivation for human behavior. So when you apply it to why would somebody be motivated to live in Winnebago County when you can't provide for the foundational security, which is defined by Maslow as security, order, law, stability, and freedom from fear. Well, if you cut your Sheriff's Department, you're not going to have that. People will not stay, and you will lose their revenues from property tax and the 1% sales tax. That money will go. I challenge you to reconsider that the value of the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department gives you...
Okay, thank you, ma'am. You're at your 3 minutes. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay.
Thank you again. If I could back up, I made a mistake and I skipped over. We have Mr. Hintz from our coroner's office here this evening to talk for just a couple of minutes about the opioid epidemic and how it's impacting his office and the community. And I'd ask Mr. Hintz to just come on up for a few minutes and give us, I believe you have some information in front of you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Chairman Haney, and good evening to the county board members. I wanted to come and talk with you tonight the same day that President Trump has declared that this is an opioid crisis. It's a nationwide public health emergency. Real quick, President Trump is quoted as saying, and I want to read this to get it right, "No part of our society, nor young nor old, rich or poor, urban or rural, has been spared this plague of drug addiction and this horrible, horrible situation that's taking place with opioids. BBC News on 9/28/17 is quoted as saying, about 124 deaths each day in the U.S. are due to drug overdoses. That's an equivalent of September 11th every 3 weeks. What I wanted to do is to be able and come and talk to you not only just about our country, but our county. Our county is going through a huge, huge opioid epidemic. You do have some numbers in front of you, so you'll be able to read those, but I wanted to share just a few quick numbers. Going back 11 years to 2006, we had a total of 33, you don't have these numbers in front of you here, we had a total of 33 overdose deaths in this county. 8 were due to heroin, 25 were due to cocaine. Jumping ahead to 2015, we had a total of 92 deaths due to overdoses. To give you some numbers to compare that to, in 2015, the total number of suicide deaths in our county were 37. The total number of auto accident deaths were 39. Total number of homicide deaths were 25. But yet our overdose deaths were 92. And then going to what you guys have in front of you, 2016. And the reason I want to give you some statistics is reality, it's hardcore numbers. 96 people died in 2016 due to the opioid deaths. And that's a combination of everything from heroin to cocaine to prescription drugs to non-prescription drugs. Out of those 96 deaths, only 7 of those were related or had a relation to fentanyl. We've heard of fentanyl in the news lately. Jumping ahead to this year, to the beginning of October, we've had a total of 89 deaths due to the opioid issues. Again, everything from the cocaine to the heroin, the fentanyl. 7 from last year. This year, to the beginning of October, we're at 32. This is a huge, huge problem. I know we talked about all sort of synthetic opioids. I just wanted to bring attention that this is a crisis. This is not going away anytime soon. I've had a lot of people ask, what can we do? How can we help this situation? I take a look at a big puzzle. And if you're to dump all of these pieces of the puzzle out and you throw the box away, I've got to make this big picture. And the picture and the pieces are police and the fire and the EMS and hospital, the Rosecrans, the remedies, the coroner's office, legislators. Being able to try and bring money back to our community to try and help all of these organizations. It's a never-ending battle. It's only going to get worse. But I know that if we keep working hard, we're going to be able to combat this. We will be able to turn this around. It's just going to take a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of compassion in this community. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention.
Thank you. Mr. Hintz, any questions by board members? I see a few hands. Mr. Wilson, then Mr. Jury.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Narcan, what effects have that done to help reduce these overdoses?
The Narcan has definitely helped quite a bit. We've got several different ways. Obviously, the fire departments, the police department, the sheriff's department carry it. We actually, as coroner's office deputies, carry Narcan ourselves to be able to help if there's a situation on the scene. I know that from what I've heard, Walgreens is now selling Narcan. It's a very sensitive subject. Is it something that's going to definitely help? I definitely think it's out there as a tool, but it's not the saving tool by any means.
Next question. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Next, Mr. Jury.
Thank you, Chairman Haney. First of all, Ms. Rayton, I want to thank you and your staff for what you do. You have a job I don't think many of us would want, but your staff does an excellent job, and I know the long hours, the calls that you go all over aren't the most pleasant. But thank you on behalf of the county board for what you do, and thank you for bearing with us on this serious budget issue in running your office to the best of your ability. Having said that, what can we do about these overdoses? I don't think, as a society, we can't legislate our way out of it. And I don't think, you know, these are issues that our society has gone wayward somewhere, and I don't know how we're going to correct the situation.
You know, that's a very good question. How can we correct, how can we reverse what's happening right now with this epidemic? There are a number of things I think that definitely will help. I definitely think the more we talk about it, the more we get into the public, the more we, you know, because I firmly believe when we take a look at these numbers, the drugs, they don't care whether you're male or female, whether your race is what it is. They don't care your age. We've had, you know, the numbers here showing everywhere from 18 to 70 years old. So it doesn't matter what it is. It's, I think peer pressure has a lot to do with it. I think education, if we keep educating more and more and just making everybody understand that this is a deadly drug, take it once and it will kill you. Being able to bring money, like I said, bring resources back to our community, I think will definitely help.
I think the more we publicize this, will help. I mean, you know, the more people, young people see this. So whatever we can do to help you manage.
Absolutely. You're welcome. Thank you.
The highway guys are a little different. Just kidding.
Amen.
Mr. Jury, you all set? Thank you, Mr. Jury. Mr. Nicolosi.
Thank you, Chairman. You know, we brought this topic up maybe a few meetings back, so this isn't necessarily directed at you, Bill, but more so, my understanding, the city of Dixon is making great strides in changing their number. They're doing a lot of different techniques, and they're getting national attention for battling this epidemic that we're having, this crisis. And just kind of curious if you guys have been in touch with those down there. And again, I just want to repeat that to our board, that we have a somewhat local municipality that's having a lot of success, and we really need to give them a call and see what we can do. I also like to thank WREX. They're making this a week or two long kind of a deal where they're really putting a spotlight on this. They're having a lecture about this at the Nordloff Center. I encourage everyone to go to this, because as elected officials, it's our responsibility to learn more, because if we're not here to protect the people, we're hypocrites. And this is right on the front lines of that, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nicolosi. I have a couple more hands up. Mrs. Gorel and Mr. Webster. Mrs. Gorel.
Thank you, Chairman. You know, I've been preaching this for a long time, because this drug problem has continued to escalate and escalate. Until we stop those drugs from coming into our town, our county, it isn't going to go away. It just isn't. And if you look at television, you look at movies, you see them all partying, taking drugs. We don't set good examples for people either. And you're going to find that many of the people who go into rehab are the ones who are ODing, because they come out of rehab and all of a sudden they're back into their drugs again. So until we eliminate the source, it's going to take forever to get rid of it, if we can ever get rid of it. Remember the war on drugs. Where did it go? We tried that years ago, and it's still hanging around. Never did go anywhere. And until we stop those drugs from coming into our area, we're going to continue to have this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Gorel. Mr. Webster.
Thank you. You know, 2 weeks ago, Bert opened up the door to this conversation on the board floor here. And I followed up on Bert's comment there, and I asked if you would contact the Dixon Police Department and see if they wouldn't have someone come up here and address us as to how their program is working and the successes and how long it took to build their program. Did that happen? Have they been contacted?
I'm going to talk to the sheriff first. I feel more comfortable before I, as chairman, reach out to the sheriff's peer in Dixon. I'll speak to the sheriff. I'll speak to Sheriff Caruana first. There's been a number of things going on, and no, I didn't get to it. I think it's a heck of a good idea. I will be in touch with the sheriff, and we'll get you an update here very shortly, either at the next public safety meeting or the next county board meeting. But I will work through the sheriff and his peers on that as a first step. And there may be some things that are being coordinated I'm not aware of, so I don't want to skip that part of the process, but thank you for the follow-up. I have, I think, Mr. Grohl.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Webster. Thank you, Bill. Heroin is overcoming a lot of lives in this region, not just in our region, but across the nation. You know, with the cost of the drug, the availability, it's so readily available that it's being more used over and over again. And we're seeing the mix of fentanyl into this, which is killing people almost instantly. You know, the war on drugs in the 80s, we put almost $1 trillion into that war, and we got nowhere. We had no plan going into that. It was just the war on drugs. We got to stop the source. That's going to win it, but it doesn't do that. We need a strategic plan. We need to work with the city of Rockford, city of Dixon, everybody else. We need to collaborate, put our resources together, and come up with a plan to combat this. So, you know, I would appreciate and applaud the chairman if he could take strides and make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Girl. Appreciate the comments. Any other questions for Mr. Hintz? Thank you very much, and thanks for being such a great partner. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Yes. Thank you. We can give him a hand if you Next item of business, approval of minutes. May I please have a motion to approve the minutes from September 28th, 2017 meeting and to lay over the minutes from October 12th, 2017. I see a motion by Mr. Jury, a second by Mr. Boomer. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Next item of business are announcements and communications. Clerk Mullins.
The items listed below were received as correspondence.
Okay, thank you very much, Clerk Mullins. And next item of business will be our board member correspondence. Any questions, comments by board members? Mr. Webster.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to take a moment to send best wishes to one of our very best friends and our most highly esteemed board member, Ted Biondo. Happy birthday.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Any other board member comments? I have Mrs. Gorel, then Mr. Wilson. Mrs. Gorel.
First of all, Chairman, I want to thank you for our update, knowing that we are going to get closer to our strategic plan. I'm glad it's finally coming about, and I'm looking forward to that. You also, as members of the board, got information from Winnebago County Health Department that I truly wish you would pay attention to, because they have sent you their strategic plan. Their strategic plan they've had for years, and they and the River Bluff Nursing Home both have had strategic plans for a long time. And they keep them updated and keep reviewing them and keep going forward, and it's been the best thing. Also, you'll see that as you read through, I know it's a 28-page report, but read through some of that so you actually find out what the health department is doing and how they do it. It's amazing what gets done when you have a good strategic plan. The other thing, one more thing I want to talk to you about, and that's in regards to the work release program. When I read this in the paper a couple of weeks ago, I was really surprised to find out where these people who are inmates, what they're doing and the type of jobs they have, and there's only one person, I believe it's Sergeant Kirby, that takes care of them. And if you actually go and find out, I have a whole list of the things that they're doing in our community. In its community, it's all over. It's just not Winnebago County, it's all over our community with a lot of the not-for-profits. I really would like to have us take another look at that. Perhaps the safety committee can get involved, or see if there's some way that we can maintain that, that work crew. I think it's vital that we do that. I believe it's good that the people in our community see them out on the street working, but more so, it gives them incentive to want to work. So I do hope the safety committee will take a look at it, and that your board members will get behind this and get more involved and see what truly that work group does. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Gorel. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a reminder that tomorrow from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. at 406 North Main Street, the Melson Club will be the Veterans Stand Down. I questioned you about showing up. You agreed to show up. Thank you. And it includes men and women. There will be flu shots sponsored by the Health Department, clothing, accessories for men and women. Again, it's at 406 North Main Street tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson. Any other board member comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to the chairman's report. A couple quick items. We'll get the date out. I think Mr. Nicolosi makes a good point. I believe our WRX is doing a forum coming up. We'll get that date out again to everybody. You should have received that, but that will be put in writing to you, and we'll get that out to the board again tomorrow. Since Mrs. Gorel brought up the health department's strategic plan, although it was sent, let's resend that maybe tomorrow. Perhaps Julia could connect with Dr. Martell just to get a copy of that, and then we'll resend it since it's top of mind. A couple other things. I want to thank the City of Loves Park, Rockford Park District, City of Rockford, and some of our professional staff got together again last week to talk about ways in which we can find efficiencies between agencies. Around one topic of many is joint purchasing, and there's several items that have been identified by just putting our smart professional staff in the same room and telling them to come up with solutions to find better ways to do business, to better serve taxpayers. So there's some exciting things being talked about, none of which are home runs, a lot of base hits, but we should be looking at this stuff on an ongoing basis, so I want to thank all involved. Number two, on Tuesday, November 14th, we will get this out in writing again to the board. You should have received a calendar invite. The Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority is going to present specially for the county board. They did this for Rockford City Council last month, but just for our board, although an open meeting, of course, probably as comprehensive of overview of crime data that I've ever seen, and it's being shared broadly, but they want to talk to elected leaders, have you really understand what they're seeing. This isn't about politics, it's not about ideology, this is actually what the data is telling us when they look deep at it, and there's a very specific meeting just specifically for our board, and I hope you all can attend. Again, Tuesday, November 14th, and we will get out multiple reminders on that. The next evening, Wednesday, November 15th, is the Rockford Area Economic Development Council dinner. Their topic is the workforce development concept of 721, something near and dear to my heart, and I think is apropos to any forward movement of our community in the coming years. There is a complimentary table we get as the county because we participate in an investor in the EDC. We do have some seats open. Contact, I believe, Julia Halstead if interested. That'll be in a follow-up memo about dates to remember. Update on the 911 consolidation discussion. This has been going on for well over a year prior to the new board being seated, but obviously there's been some discussion recently. I do not have a specific update. We will keep the Public Safety Committee updated as we move forward, but I know there's renewed interest in moving faster versus slower in seeing through the consolidation. What that means would be the 911 center at Winnebago County, potentially moving under the fire department under Chief Bergston in the city of Rockford. So that just so this doesn't sneak up on anybody, not asking for anybody's approval. Yes, the county board would have to officially approve that. There would be more discussion as we get more information coming. The courthouse. On Monday there was a big long line, I believe, at the courthouse, and that was the first day of some staffing changes out of the Sheriff's Department. I do have an update, just so we stay connected as a board with that topic. I did have a very positive conversation with the Sheriff, and a couple of things. Number one, that was their first day. I believe he believes, has every confidence, they are adequately staffed going forward. They were. There was, I believe, 177 new jurors that showed up, And because of the lawyer's entrance was shifted on that one time on the first day, you had upwards of 250 people showing up at exactly the same time, which was the start of the workday. I know it's an adjustment. I know that caused some heartburn, but Tuesday I drove by at exactly that time and there was no line. I've heard no issues since then. So although there was heartburn on Monday, I see that progressing in a manner that serves the public well in lieu of recent budget cuts. Last thing is, I believe the board now has been sent the clerk recorder consolidation study. That is all in your inboxes. I believe there'll be a discussion in Mr. Jury's Operations Committee in the near future, and discussions will ensue there. Lastly, I believe this should not be the first time you're hearing this. The host fee application process for external allocations for fiscal year 18 is underway. If anybody approaches you about how they may be considered on a one-time funding opportunity, invite them to visit our website, or let our office, Julia specifically, know, and we can email them the link, and they do need to formally apply. That way it's on record. Everybody that's interested, we'll look at it administratively and be taking it to Mr. Westcott's Economic Development Committee here in the coming weeks. So that's the update I have. Any questions on anything I shared with you this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to our next item of business, the consent agenda. And Mr. Vanderwerth has turned down his phone, and I want to follow up. He sent an update at the request, I believe, of Mr. Schultz on capital projects for fiscal year 18. Should have hit your inboxes, folks. Is there any questions board members have for Mr. Vanderwerth on that particular information? I know we do a good job of talking in Public Works, but is anything broadly? If you do have any follow-ups, go ahead and contact Mr. Vanderwerth directly. Oh, yes, Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my comment would be not for tonight because we have a very full agenda, but at a future time, if we could just see the correlation between the previous reporting we saw in this room regarding the roads that needed the most attention and how that lines up with the projects that are in this year's budget, that would be helpful.
Okay. Does that work, Joe? Yes, we can do that. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. I'm going to ask Kim Ponder to come up here to the first seat. Mr. Schultz asked a few weeks ago, in fact, probably a few more than a few weeks ago, for delineation on what the leave of absence, when there's a leave of absence in the consent agenda, what is it and what is it not? And there is some nuance to that. It makes sense, but it does need to be explained by professional staff. And I turn things over to Kim Ponder.
Thank you, Jim. There are times, so this is not to approve each and every leave of absence that happens within the county. What this is on the agenda for is there are times where people take a leave of absence and it is tied to their benefit service credit under IMRF. So there are times where people take a leave of absence when they're not in any kind of a compensation status. They're not getting short-term disability from IMRF, they're not getting workers' comp, TTD, they're not getting any type of compensation on our system. They're in what's called an unpaid status. They need to protect their service credit under IMRF. Otherwise, they lose the ability to, if something happened to them, they would not be eligible for the death benefits. They would not be eligible to continue to accrue for the months that there's no income denoted to IMRF. Those types of leaves of absence could be something where someone took an unpaid educational leave. Let's say they're on military status and not being paid by us, but being paid by our national system. Or if they're just on an unpaid status for some reason, they would want to use this service protection process. Those have to be approved by the board because they're buying back time. And when they buy back time from IMRF, there's a commitment that we have to match that funding. And because of that financial contribution that needs to be made, it's required, IMRF requires that these leave of absence be certified by the board and approved for that compensation, that matching contribution that's made. That's the reason for it.
Any follow-up questions by board members on that. And maybe what I'll ask is if there is either a policy or in the near future, if we could just come up with a one-pager, just so we have a reference page on this in case this question comes up in the future. It'll just be a good resource for us. Mr. Schultz.
Based on that explanation, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Based on that explanation, I would very much like at least a summary report of the categories and the number of people in those categories. So for example, if it was medical leave and we happen to have 4 people that fell in that category based on what we were voting on at a given meeting, that we would see military leave -4. We don't need names, we don't need personal information, but at least it would be an information item. And educational leave would be another category. Maybe there are common ones besides that. But at this stage, I do feel still very uncomfortable with a vote on the board floor on something that I have really no information. In fact, at one point I was told, well, it's on the agenda every time, but that doesn't mean we actually have any leaves of absences that are there that we're dealing with. So a minimal level of reporting, I think, is required for this board to be responsible. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm going to turn that back over to our staff and say maybe we can talk about that, and then maybe bring an update to Mr. Jury's Operations Committee and just see what we can come up with for board consideration. I think that makes the most sense. And as we're looking at the consent agenda this evening, and if I'm reading it correctly, I believe I am, there are no leaves being asked for your okay this evening, as is the case some other evenings as well. Yes, and to Mr. Schultz's point, under consent agenda every time it does list the 3 items: leave of absence, raffle report, monthly bills. So that would make an obvious statement that in the future, if leave of absence is not on the agenda, there's nothing to consider, we won't have it generically added to cause any confusion. And I'm seeing heads nod yes. So we can make that change immediately and then get a little more data to the Operations Committee for discussion. And I think we can button this up so everybody feels good about it. And I appreciate the question, Mr. Schultz. With that, any other questions on this particular topic? Yes, Mrs. Gorl.
Thank you. Do we have anyone on leave of absence at this time?
We have at any given time roughly 130 employees on a leave of absence, whether it's intermittent or straight through time. But not all of these. We usually only have 1 or 2 of these type of items that need to be approved by the board to buy back that time yearly. But we do always have people on leave of absence, yes, under federal guidelines, yes.
And we follow federal law, Kim, on that. There's federal law we follow, and we adhere to that on an ongoing basis.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. Follow up by Mr. Webster.
Yeah, just one question here. Kim, that brings the question to mind there. What is our head count now for employees?
At last count, I believe we're at 1,265 total.
1,265 total. Okay. And that excludes Sheriff's Department?
No, that is inclusive.
That includes it. Okay, thank you. 1,265.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. And Kim, thank you very much for your extra help this evening. With that, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda with a notation that there is no leave of absence items on the agenda this evening. I have a motion by Mr. Nicolosi and a second by Mr. Jury. Any questions by board members on the consent agenda before the board? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Consent agenda approved. Next item of business, standing committees. Mr. Biondo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me see, I've got so many changes on here. I don't have to read them as I go. Budget amendment 2017-025 has been removed. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Biondo.
And then I would like to read in item C, budget amendment 2017-021, host fee fund to be laid over.
Thank you.
And then I would like to suspend the rules. We have basically $6,328. It's Greater Rockford Airport commitments to IGA, and it's $6,328. I'd like to suspend the rules.
We have a motion to suspend the rules that would allow us to vote this evening. A motion to suspend by Mr. Biondo. I have a second by Mr. Gurl. All those in favor of suspending the rules signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Biondo.
I'd like to make a motion to approve Budget Amendment 2017-028.
We have a motion by Mr. Biondo on item C, the budget amendment around the host fee fund. I got a second by Mr. Jury. Any comments by board members? This budget amendment, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Mr. Biondo.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the resolution awarding a proposal for Baker Tilly for our audits.
We have a motion by Mr. Biondo on item D, the resolution awarding proposal to Baker Tilly, a second by Mr. Hoffman and Mr. Jury and Mr. Gurl. Any questions by board members on the change in auditing firm?
Yes, I'd like to speak to that.
Mr. Biondo.
I'd like to call Carla. You know, we had our committee, and Carla called the Baker Tilly firm and got us actually some reductions. So you'd speak to that, please.
Carla?
Yeah, we had requested proposals from 7 different firms. We received 5 proposals. Baker Tilly had originally provided some fees, and when we requested a reduction in their original proposal, we received a reduction in the fee for 2017 of $6,600, 2018 $7,500, and 2019 of $8,500. That will leave the fees for the single audit and the county financial audit for 2017 at $123,000, 2018 $126,000, and 2019 at $129,000. That is less than the firm that we were with before. Baker Tilly has a lot of experience in auditing county governments. In Illinois, they audit Champaign, DuPage, Kane, Lake, McHenry, McLean, and Will counties. They audit 15 Wisconsin counties, 1 Iowa county, 5 Minnesota counties, and 6 Pennsylvania counties. Included in the proposed fees is an annual board member training, 2 meetings with the finance committee or the board, complimentary webinars. They hold a county CFO roundtable 3 times a year, and I've attended that roundtable twice. It's very informative. They have web-based resource libraries for any of the staff or the board members to use. And the partner that will be serving on the engagement is the chair of the AICPA State and Local Government Expert Panel. They do a lot of government work in addition to counties, but I think they're really an excellent firm.
Thank you, Carla.
So I would like to make a, I think we already did.
The motion to approve Baker Tilly is before the board.
Right.
Yes. Mr. Salgado.
Yeah, just point of clarification. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. I believe we approached Baker Tilly to see if they could reduce after we awarded them. So not to say that before or anything of that nature. I just want to make sure that we're crystal clear on that. Decision was made beforehand, and that we were recommended to approach Baker Tilly for a reduction, and they did so. So just want to make sure that our ducks in a row and everybody doesn't get misrepresented on that aspect.
Thank you, Mr. Salgado. Carla, anything you want to add to that process?
Probably just that since it's professional services and there is a level of expertise associated with that, we weren't required to do a formal RFP. However, we did reach out to several firms to make sure that the fees were in line.
Thank you very much, Mr. Salgado. Thank you, and Carla, thank you. Mr. Biondo, anything you'd like to add?
No, that's it.
Okay, any other questions on the Baker Tilly resolution before the board? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Mr. Biondo.
Thank you. I'd also like to make a motion to approve a resolution authorizing hiring of the law firm of Robbins Swords to represent the County of Winnebago County Board Chairman Frank Haney and County Treasurer Sue Gorel in Winnebago County case 2017-MR-658.
I have a motion by Mr. Biondo to adopt item E, which is the hiring of an outside law firm in the case with the courts. I have a second by Mr. Hoffman and Mr. Jury. The item is now before the board, and if it pleases the board, I'd just like to make one quick statement here. This law firm, Mr. Biondo and I worked with, I know I shared this with the board before, in our service on Rock Valley's board over the years, and have every confidence in this firm's ability to represent the taxpayers of Winnebago County. I would also say that there was some news around this in the paper today, and I stand by the statement that I do believe, and I want to say it again, I think Joe McGraw is a good chief judge. And from my understanding as the new chairman, he served on the county board in years past and was a good county board member. With that said, I also believe that you cannot be both. And I am concerned about this situation. This board I am proud of. We have done everything to put the past in the past. We are looking forward to working with our partners. One guy I respect, Mr. Gasparini, even gave me a kiss tonight. We have to move forward as a county, and I don't want to be hiring outside counsel. I think it's unfortunate, but I think it's necessary under our current climate, and that is where we're at right now. So I know this board wanted to come into this and move forward in a positive manner, and it's an unfortunate necessity. Any other comments by board members?
I'd like to say something too. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We also followed the procedure in the state statutes for hiring an attorney. We went through the state's attorneys. They sent out to all the state's attorneys. Then the judge actually said that we could have our own attorney, and so that's what we're doing now, is we're hiring them.
And this too, to Mr. Biondo's point, is professional services, and we are in adherence with the purchasing policy as well. Any other questions by board members? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Biondo.
I'd like to I'd like to look at, read the tax levies, items F through R to be laid over, and I move to lay them over.
We have a motion to lay over items F all the way through R, and these are the tax levies. We have a motion by Mr. Biondo, a second by Mr. Nicolosi and Mr. Boomer. Any comments on these items, these multitude of tax levy items to be laid over to our next board meeting in 2 weeks? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Biondo.
That concludes our report.
Thank you very much. Next item of business, our zoning committee, Mr. Webster.
Thank you. This won't take long. We have one item from the zoning committee. We had a meeting this evening. The item is Z1817. It's a map amendment, and this is in County Board District 9. It's on behalf of John C. Kenny Revocable Trust. It's at 5700 Fitzgerald Road, County Board District 9, and it came with a recommendation of approval from the Zoning Board of Appeals 5-2, and it came out of Zoning Committee with a recommendation of approval 3-2. So this is in for a first reading, and we'll be voting on this in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Webster. Next item of business, we have economic development, Mr. Westcott.
Thank you, Chairman. We have a resolution, I couldn't figure out where I'm at here. Resolution authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement with the Village of New Milford amending host fee payments, and this is to be laid over. That includes my report.
Thank you very much. We'll see you in 2 weeks, and we'll get that buttoned up and be ready to go. Next item of Business Operations Administrative Committee, Mr. Jury.
Thank you, Chairman Haney. Your Operation Administrative Committee has an ordinance, was read in the last meeting, creating the position of a Chief Information Officer, and I move for its adoption.
We have an ordinance, item B, ordinance creating the position of Chief Information Officer and establishing the Information Technology Department. A motion by Mr. Jury, second by Mr. Hoffman and Mrs. Gorel and Mr. Biondo. Any questions by board members on the ordinance before the board on the IT position? Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just curious, has a job description or salary range been described yet?
I will look to Carla perhaps. What I do believe it is in the budget for fiscal year 18. I don't have that exact number at this point.
I think it was like 124,400 something, roughly. It was an odd number, I remember, but it's about between 124,000 and 125,000.
I can speak to that. When it comes, it'll be posted so everyone can see it. But I also want to remind my colleagues that this position will be appointed by the chairman, and it will be okayed and ratified by the board.
Thank you. Any questions by board members on item B on the formation of the technology or the technology position? Since it's an ordinance, we'll do a roll call. Any board members object to the motion before the board? Seeing none, we'll ask the clerk to cast a yes vote for all members present. Item passes. Mr. Jury.
That concludes our report. Thank you.
Next item of business, Public Works Committee, Mr. Kelly.
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Next item of business, Public Safety Committee, Mr. Fiducia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your Public Safety Committee is bringing in 5 items tonight for your consideration. The first item is a resolution authorizing an independent contractor agreement for services of Winnebago County Liaison, and I so move its approval.
We have a motion by Mr. Fiducia on item B, independent contractor agreement for services. May I have a second to the motion? Mr. Booker, Mrs. Crosby, and Mrs. Wren. Any questions, comments by board members on item B under public safety? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Fiducia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next is a resolution authorizing the county board chairman to enter into a contract for provision of inmate mental health services, and I so move.
We have a motion by Mr. Fiducia on item C, the authorizing the chairman to enter into a contract for provision of inmate mental health services. May I have a second? Mr. Booker. Any discussion by board members on item C? Seeing none, all those, we have a question by Mr. Schultz.
I apologize, but I was not able to review the notes on that. Is it an increase, a decrease? Is it the same?
Go ahead, Mr. Fiducia.
Actually, it was a loss of contract. Rosecrans did not want to continue on, and so we put it out to bid, and I believe I don't have the exact number of what the cost was.
If I may, I'm going to go to Ann Johns. Ann?
We're going to save from Rosecrans roughly just shy of $38,000 from what was proposed by them. And we're going to have weekend coverage where now we're just going to have on call for the weekend.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schultz. You good? Okay, thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any other questions on item C before the board? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Fiducia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next is a resolution authorizing animal services microchip contract, and I so move.
We have a motion by Mr. Fiducia on item D, resolution on animal services microchip contract. A second by Mr. Westcott, a second by Mr. Nicolosi and Mrs. Red. Any questions by board members on item D before the board? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Fiducia.
Thank you. Next is a resolution authorizing participation in the Hill Shelter Feeding Program, and I so move.
We have a motion by Mr. Fiducia on item E, resolution on participation in the Hill Shelter Feeding Program. Second by Mr. Westcott, Mr. Booker, Mr. Hoffman, Mrs. Red. Any discussion by board members on item E? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Fiducia.
Thank you. Next is a first reading of an ordinance amending Chapter 14 of the Winnebago County Code. I would ask that we suspend the rules for this, and I would so move this.
We have a motion to suspend the rules and vote this evening on item F, Chapter 14 of the Winnebago County Code, an amendment to the animal control ordinance concerning ownership. Motion to suspend by Mr. Fiducia, a second by Mr. Boomer, Mr. Westcott, and Mrs. Red. Any questions? Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to hear a little bit about the amendment. What does this change?
You know what we'll do is, actually, I'd like the Director of Animal Services to speak to that, because it has to do with the wording in ownership. And if I could have Jill speak to that very quickly.
Thank you, Jill.
So this would just change the definition of ordinance, or definition of owners in the ordinance to not penalize those that are caring for feral cats.
Okay. Any follow-up to that, Mrs. Squirrel?
Wasn't there something about if that dog got lost, ends up in California, they'll know exactly where it came from? With this new chip that they're going to be using?
I'll refer to over here.
This is actually regarding the definition of ownership in the ordinances. The prior number D was concerning microchips, and that was the same chip that we were using in the past.
So the motion before the board is to suspend the rules and vote this evening on item F, on the ordinance around the animal control ordinance. Seeing no other questions, those in favor of suspending the rules signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Fiducia.
Now I'd like to move the ordinance amending Code 14 of County Ordinance.
We have a motion by Mr. Fiducia to approve item F. I got a second by Mr. Westcott and Mr. Hoffman. Any questions by board members on the item before the board? Seeing none, I will ask any board members opposed to this motion to indicate by saying aye. Seeing none, we'll cast a yes vote for all members present. Motion passes. Mr. Fiducia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes our report.
Thank you very much. Any unfinished business? Any new business? If not, I'll entertain a motion to go to closed session. I got a motion by Mr. Earl. We have a second. Mr. Jury, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? We'll go to closed after a very short recess. Thank you. Ready, sir. Okay, no action was taken as a result of closed session. One thing to clarify, closed session focused on litigation and personnel, just so we have that on the record, and no action was taken. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Jury, second by Mr. Boomer and Mr. Hoffman. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Have a good evening. Thank you, everybody.